There are three authors who typically are associated with the golden age of science fiction: Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and Robert Heinlein. Now, you could argue whether or not they really were all the top authors of the 1940s, but I don't think you could possibly change that list in any way without still including at least Robert Heinlein. I've started getting back into reading Robert Heinlein just recently as a result of Samantha at Bound and Tagged. She had a Heinlein book and she wanted to read it, but she found out that you need to read a few other Heinlein books first. And so she asked me where to start. We started with The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and Buddy read that. And that got me wanting to read Heinlein again. I read Heinlein years and years ago, starting with a book called The Pass Through Tomorrow, which I have here. This isn't the copy I read way back in 1978, but it's the same book. It's a collection of Heinlein's future history stories that he wrote throughout the 1940s. Now, he wrote other stories, but most of what he wrote during the 1940s were part of this series. If you read the introduction to The Pass Through Tomorrow by Damon Knight, it says in there that Heinlein walked into John Campbell's office in 1938 or 39 and showed Campbell his outline for this whole future history and all the stories that would fall into it. And Campbell was interested, so Heinlein sent him his first story, Lifeline, and Campbell published it in 1939. Now, that was a very good story, but I love the second story in The Pass Through Tomorrow, The Roads Must Roll. I thought that was an incredible story when I first read it, and I still do, for a variety of reasons. It's definitely one of Heinlein's earliest. It was published in the June 1940 issue of Astounding Stories, and this is the issue right here. It was the cover story showing a tumblebug in a motorcycle rushing in to save the day. It's an excellent cover illustration by Hubert Rogers, capturing a very exciting moment of the story. The story, although it uses a kind of preposterous scientific situation, the idea of creating a network of rolling roads across the United States to replace all the highways. Okay, no more trains, no more cars. Cars are done away with because they're dangerous. They have average people driving around in something that can kill if they misjudge something. We know that happens all the time, and we have automobile accidents. Well, Heinlein's solution to the problem of all the automobile accidents, to reduce the cost and reduce the loss of life, was to have this system of rolling roads, what in later science fiction stories would often be called slidewalks. They were kind of like escalators, but they didn't necessarily go up. You have these in airports these days where you get on and it's conveyor belt that takes you down, except Heinlein has this whole system whereby you can get all the way up to the main road that travels at 100 miles per hour. And he theorized that you would even have businesses like diners that would build on this road for people that are traveling long distances. They could go in and have a meal at a diner while they're on this moving road. Lots and lots of technical details that Heinlein never gets into here that would make this whole concept impossible. Like, how do you turn? You're going north and now you need to go west. How do you You know, how do you manage that? How do you join the roads in a way that people can go different directions? It's great if they're all going one direction, but if you need to turn, Heinlein doesn't cover that. Heinlein does not cover that possibility. So I think the whole concept at its core is impractical. But the story isn't really about that. That's just a vehicle to get across an idea, which is based on the fact that our society is dependent. In Heinlein's words in the story, our society is dependent on our transportation technologies. I'd go farther as to say it's also dependent on our communication technologies. And so whoever controls those two things can, if they want, take over everything, take over our whole society. But at the very least, the people that keep this stuff running, they have the real control. And definitely in this world Heinlein builds, in the Roads Must Roll, the technicians that keep this road from stopping, they're indispensable. The whole transportation system would totally break down if they didn't do their jobs. If something went wrong with a road, it could kill. Well, and Heinlein talks about that at one point in the story, where thousands of people die because one of the roads comes to the strip that is running on the rollers, it buckles or something and breaks and flies up, and it's all metal, and these people were going into the rollers and stuff and just getting killed. So anyway, what happens in the story is one lead technician decides he wants to be in charge. He wants to take control, and he tries to start a revolution where he and his tech buddies will run the world, or at least the country, because other nations don't have this system, just the United States. Heinlein was an amazing author, even in that time, with a short work. This is just a novelette. His characters are not super deep, but they're strong characterizations. He builds his world. He sets his technical situation. He conveys his more political idea and wraps it all up in 40 pages. It's a brilliant piece, very well written, moves along perfectly. Good flow to the story so that you get into reading it and you just keep going. You don't stop. It's an excellent story. It's definitely a top tale. It's already on our list. I just reread it as part of this current Heinlein exploration. I'm still going on H.G. Wells, but now I'm also doing Heinlein at the same time, and loving it. Heinlein is definitely one of the great science fiction authors. He definitely deserves that position of being one of the big three, or however many you want to say, authors of his generation. And he did a lot to push science fiction to where we're at today. You can't deny that. Even if you don't like some of his politics, although his politics are said to be like Ayn Rand's, very much the selfish individualist, libertarian. But I don't find that in this story. Here, he characterized, he shows people that want to rebel, to try and rise up from their working class status, but he characterizes the leader of this movement as weak and unstable. And the hero of this story is the guy that maintains the status quo, that overcomes and keeps the system in line, keeps the people in line, keeps everything for society flowing, and doesn't buck the government. So this story isn't so libertarian. Now, Heinlein may have evolved or changed over time, but at this time, he's not showing this rugged individualism that is usually ascribed to him. He's very much defending the status quo, at least in the outcome of this story, and characterizing the rebels as being weaklings, being unstable people, which is very interesting. I'm finding it very interesting because Heinlein, I think, is nothing but contradictions. He's supposed to be this right-wing libertarian, and yet he wrote a book that became almost a Bible for the counterculture revolution in the 1960s, which was very leftist. He wrote The Moon is a Harsh Mistress in the middle 1960s, after Stranger in a Strange Land, and that book has a great deal in common with H.G. Wells' When the Sleeper Wakes. And H.G. Wells was not libertarian, he was socialist. So that Heinlein is full of contradictions to the standard view of who he was and what he stood for. He stood for rationality, it seems. Whatever was most rational, whatever seemed most reasonable, whether you would call it left or call it right, I don't think he cared, so long as it made sense and wasn't stupid, and I'm finding myself admiring that, because in our days of extremes, I find the peaceful viewpoint, the rational viewpoint, is in between, not embracing either right or left. But anyway, I'm enjoying Heinlein. This is only the first of a number of videos I'm going to do about Heinlein. Emily is not joining me for this. She's got her own things she's doing. I hope you'll investigate Heinlein too. He is one of the great science fiction writers and deserving of a lot more attention than he's getting right now. I find that what happens once a writer passes away is, at first you get a lot of attention brought to their works when they first pass away, but then as a few years pass from their death, they fade out. And I don't think that's a good thing. Not for really excellent authors who wrote really excellent books, really enjoyable books, like The Path Through Tomorrow, and stories like The Roads Must Roll. I don't think they should be forgotten. I don't think they should fade away. They should remain cornerstones of our literature. And the authors should get the attention they deserve, even if we don't agree with their politics. I'll end this here, and on to the next Heinlein, or Wells, whichever one I do first. I'm still working on The War of the Air. That's coming this month. I'm going to finish it this month. I'm going to do the review this month. So far, it's an excellent book. So, see you next time on Telltale. Bye.